Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good! Oh, yeah?
Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard. Hi, hello, how's it going? Welcome in to another episode of The Lager Line, served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. This is the show where we talk all things Houston Rockets basketball at least once per week with support from our friends and sponsors over at, we mentioned Carbach Brewing, but also Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of the team, and Rockets Wire, where I, Ben Dubose, am the editor. RocketsWire.usatoday.com. Go there for all of your daily Houston Rockets news coverage. Today, I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host Paulo Alves out of Portugal. Paulo, you ready for this tanking Super Bowl between the Rockets and Spurs this weekend?
What's up, y'all? I'm way less stressed than I thought I'd be, just because the Spurs have a 2-game lead now. So I don't know how Pop's allowing himself to win some games. But I think if we split it one win apiece, I think we're not 100% safe, but comfortably safe. You know, in the Wemby Bowl, I guess, in the race to the bottom at the end of the year.
And I keep going back to the December games. The Spurs won by an average of 14 per game, and now they're getting Devin Vassell back. I know they lost 16 games, which was worse than the Rockets have lost at any point this year. They had their 13-game skid in January. Now they're on an 11-game skid, their second double-digit skid of the 2023 calendar year. The Spurs just wrapped up a 16, but again, that 16-gamer was without Vassell, and you go back to December when they had him, that's when they beat the Rockets twice by an average of 14 per game. So I'd be very surprised if the Rockets went 2-0 in these games, especially the one in San Antonio. That's sort of my outlook going in. I think also the Rockets were probably going to be very cautious with it being a back-to-back with Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., both back in the lineup, but coming off of soft tissue injuries, Jalen with his groin, and well, I guess with KPJ, it's his toe, that contusion that kept him out for nearly 2 months. But the same principle applies. It's not like you're going to play them 35 plus minutes per game on both ends of a back-to-back, I wouldn't think. So between that, the Spurs getting Vassell back, and how well they seem to match up, the discipline of what Greg Popovich typically does versus whatever it is that Steven Silas is doing here in Houston, I'd be shocked if the Rockets go 2-0, right?
Yeah, and I will touch on this since we're going to have a little bit of a more free-flowing podcast, and we will get to bigger picture stuff. And I know we say this a lot. We always say, oh, we're going to dedicate the spot to bigger picture stuff, and then we end up having like 3 or 4 pods in a row where we talk about it. Well, let's just face it. The team's god awful. It's the same problems over and over and over again. We could just rant about Şengün being benched, or his effort last game, which is god awful as well. We could just rant about all the problems with the team, but unless there's something new or a new angle to be sad about or upset about, there really isn't much to talk about. But
I did think, by the way, you had a point earlier today on your timeline about the potential for a shooting coach. We know this offseason is a point in which the Rockets could have a lot of changes on the coaching staff. This is the last fully guaranteed year of Steven Silas' contract, which makes it even more likely, in my opinion, that they're going to look elsewhere after this season. And shooting is such an issue up and down this roster. We've been through it with Jabari Smith Jr. ad nauseum, the lack of improvement there. Actually, it feels like it's getting worse. Jalen Green, some of it could be the shot selection, but he hasn't taken the leap forward that a lot of us wanted to see. It feels like every year we talk about a breakthrough for Jayshawn Tate, KJ Martin. That hasn't really happened. So we've seen positive results from Oklahoma City after they invested in a shooting coach in the offseason. The Rockets haven't done that. It's getting so bad now. It's not just that they're missing threes. They're reluctant to even take them. You mentioned very recently that Ty Washington was one of the only guys that was even willing to pull the trigger in either the Denver game or the Memphis game. So, yeah, to me, it's one of those things. It's only if it's not the same, it's getting worse. It's certainly not getting better. So I don't know really what else there is to say, right?
Yeah, I think at this point, a lot of us, I think John Lucas is the responsible for shooting amongst the current coaching staff. I mean, I love John Lucas for what he brings from a personality standpoint, from a locker room
Leadership, voice.
leadership
Yeah.
standpoint, yeah. But when it comes to the shooting, man, one of the cases we brought up of guys that were a success story under Lucas for this iteration of the team was Kenyon Martin Jr. He's KJ is basically the guy that didn't know how to shoot at all coming out of college, and year
Mhm.
one, year two, he was starting to be able to shoot. He had that's really slow release jump shot that looks kind of gimmicky, and he's worked on it, and it's gotten better. When it comes to to release speed and how the shot looks, it has become better. It looks better, but it's still just going in at a 32% rate this season. And let's not act like this is all KPJ and Jalen, or what. Let's not act like this is on the cards, or the fact that we can't generate good shots. We generate good shots. Teams are letting us shoot all the time. I mean, if you watch the games, you notice it. We just can't make them.
Yeah.
And I struggle to believe that this is a team building problem. Not to defend Rafael Stone as I always do, but I mean, there's a lot of guys here that are supposed to be shooters that are just
Right.
not shooting well. KPJ is kind of a saving grace. He's been better, and we know how good he is. He's just misused by the coaching staff. If he is off the ball, he's one of the best catch and shoot players in the league. We know this. Taitai is supposed to be a shooter. Josh Resort had some questions, but he is a good mid-range shooter, and you would expect him to further out that range. Daishan Nix shot 40% from three in the G League last year on I think 5 point something attempts per game. Jalen Green is supposed to be a volume shooter. He's a tough shot maker, and his the percentages tank a little bit because he's on the ball so much, but he's still supposed to
Right.
be a shooter, and he is at 33%, I think, this year. Jabari Smith Jr. is supposed to be a shooter. Tariq has been a surprise, but even his percentages are down. KJ
Right.
Martin has largely, the release is better, but it's largely not been great. Jeshante has not gotten better shooting it and at any point, and he's an older player, but this team doesn't lack guys that are projected to be shooters and were better shooters earlier in their careers. Jabari Smith was a 40-something% shooter in college, and the last 2 years of high school, he was a good shooter. Jalen Green shot 36% from three on a season with the Ignite before being drafted. These guys, Shengun has gotten better at shooting. He doesn't get to take them a lot, so it's really
He's
hard to
still hesitant.
judge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to judge, but a priority should definitely be to get someone who's, especially someone who can help these guys learn how to shoot. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but I saw a couple of people bring up on Twitter that the priority in the offseason should be to sign free agents that are shooters. I, I mean, while that is important, I don't think that is the most important part because it doesn't matter if we're bringing shooters if your foundational pieces that are supposed to shoot can't shoot. If Jordan Green can't shoot, if Jabari Smith can't shoot, these guys are not NBA players and they're not guys you should be banking on building around. So at that point, you're kind of trying to plug holes, but the holes get bigger and bigger because we know modern NBA you can have one non-shooter on the floor at most. In some rare cases, you can have two, especially if they are, the point guard and the center sometimes, depending on how the team is set up and what plays they run. But to your point, it has to get better, and you have to wonder if John Lucas is the right guy for the job because it's clearly not working this season.
Well, or I mean, you could keep John Lucas and just have a shooting specialist. Again,
Yeah,
it's not his
I mean,
primary job. He can
yeah,
still
I
be a
mean
satisfactory
as the
assistant.
shooting
Yeah,
coach.
as the lead, because yeah, when Oklahoma City, as an example, we use Oklahoma City as a counterexample so many times because, of course, they're a team that going into the year was seen on a fairly similar timetable and scale. Other than they do have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. In fairness, we should point that out. But other than that, a lot of similarities to Houston, and clearly they've taken leaps forward in ways the Rockets have not. So it's easy to point to them. And they basically supplemented their existing assistant coaching staff with the guy they brought in, Chip Engelland from the Spurs, a guy that's renowned at that. And so, yeah, it's not so much saying that, John Lucas or anyone else isn't doing that. No, it's that you can supplement the types of guys you already have with that type of hire. Or in this case, assuming they make a full blown coaching change, perhaps they keep John Lucas, but I think most of us expect most of the current staff not to be back once their contracts expire, or at least once the Stephen Silas contract expires. after this season, then yeah, you don't even have to look at it as saying it's a failure of who's there now. No, it can be just bringing in someone, investing more to supplement it, because it is a problem. You're right. We should point out that while no one other than probably Jabari Smith Jr. was supposed to be a truly elite shooter on the current roster, it's not like it was supposed to be as bad as it currently is. There's a lot of guys, as you mentioned, that should have been at least passable, and they're not. And when you see it just happen to player after player, it starts to feel systemic. It starts to feel like something is happening with the development, the lack thereof, confidence. It's clearly gotten into their heads in recent weeks because, again, your point on, I forget if it was the Denver game or the Memphis game, was astute. They were refusing, other than Ty, to even take those shots, which is really alarming.
It's as simple as this. That is not a single guy, and this is, and I just checked this as we were talking. There's not a single guy on this roster that is shooting over 1 3 a game, or over 1 3 a game, that is shooting 36%. And that's below average now. I think the average is 37 point something percent. But usually people point to 36% as the average. There's not a single guy on this team shooting 36% on over one attempt per game. Why do I say over one attempt per game? Because Usman Garuba, who takes a 3 every 5 games, is shooting 50% on the lowest sample size you'll ever see. But of the guys that actually shoot, not a single one.
Well, one of the really interesting things to me about, I guess, that 24-hour whirlwind, aside from how brutal it was, well, I guess that's not even interesting. That's something that we've grown accustomed to by now. So it's sort of baked in. This is the way the 2022 to 23 Houston Rockets season is going to go. So the losses, as crazy as it is, the second double-digit losing skid in under 3 months, we're sort of used to it. I think a lot of us are just in the mode of waiting
So
for
much
April
so
to get
that
here.
so much so that I hadn't even noticed it got to 10 games again. It's
That
it's
says it
that
all.
bad.
But what was really interesting to me is you had these two losses against the Nuggets and the Grizzlies, both at home. And of course, those are the top two teams in the Western Conference by record. And the Rockets are the worst. And both of those games clearly reflected, of course, how far the Rockets have to go. It's an enormous gap, which goes without saying. But yeah, it absolutely played out that way on the floor. The 14-point margin in the Memphis game was basically garbage time. Both of them were 20-plus point dominations. The Rockets weren't in either team's class even remotely, which again is to be expected, but it's just a sobering reminder of where the Rockets are with their rebuild, the lack of development, all the negatives that we've pointed out over and over again. And yet, in the middle of those two games, Denver Tuesday night and then Memphis Wednesday night, Wednesday morning comes out a report from Kelly Iko and Sam Amick of The Athletic. Important to note, not just Houston based. Sam Amick, one of the best national guys covering the NBA as well, talking about the James Harden Houston rumors and that the link between Harden and the Rockets on both sides is as strong as ever in terms of the mutual interest. The report says that the Rockets expect to get a meeting, assuming Harden declines his option and enters free agency, which of course he will, because he'll get paid far more by going into free agency and get more years. And of course, the article talks about the various reasons that Harden would make the move, the emotional pull of returning home to Houston, even though he's clearly in a better basketball situation in the short term alongside Joel Embiid with the Philadelphia 76ers. And I thought our friend Idamar had a tweet that really summed up the dynamic very well right after that report leaked on Wednesday morning. And I'm just going to read it to you. Man, it's such a trip watching the Rockets play some of the most depressing basketball I've ever seen, then wake up and read that James Harden has serious interest in coming back. Like, really? Why? Are you sure? Have you thought this through? Would effing love it, though. And that's basically exactly how I feel. In fact, my response to him was, don't tell him. And, I'm being just trying to get the LOLs on Twitter, I suppose, because, look, we know that Harden's thought process runs a lot deeper than maximizing title odds next season. There's a lot of reasons why he would potentially want to go back to Houston, and it's been well documented if you've read the coverage the last few months, and you can simply go back in our archives here at the Logger Line and find those episodes here. you certainly can point out that with Houston having 60 million-ish in cap room, potentially more than that if you offload Kevin Porter Jr., which you should be able to with him being basically an expiring, then for sure you could make moves beyond James Harden this offseason in terms of upgrading next year's Rockets team. But still, I don't think it'd be quite to the level of Philadelphia now. There would be other considerations at play, most notably a desire to return home and get back to what's referred to in the Athletic article as his safe space. It's the emotional pull. His head is in Philadelphia right now. He's trying to maximize the championship window. But with Houston, there's just so much on and off court, so much of a pull to it. To sum it up, it's his home. And we've talked about that in the past. But it is interesting to see the report and all this optimism at a time in which so much is going wrong for the franchise. And to me, the biggest takeaway, and I wish Rockets fans, and perhaps over the coming months, if these leaks continue and it starts to seem more inevitable, I'm not there yet to where I'm considering it inevitable, but I do think it's a very real possibility. Rockets fans, in my opinion, should be really, really thankful because this is not something that happens to
Oof,
a
you're gonna get
team that's
burned
where
for the
the Rockets
thankful.
are. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people on Twitter that still feel burned. And it's not just Twitter. I mean, anyone in the Rockets fan community, I just happen to see Twitter more often, that for one reason or another, be it his age, but I think it's less his age. It's more just using that as a prop, as an excuse not to bring him back because they just feel burned about the way things ended in 2020 or early 2021, or the fact that Harden couldn't get them over the hump to actually get them the title last decade that Rockets fans craved. And I understand where you're coming from. I'm a fan myself. I understand the emotional connection to these things. But when you really think about it, this is such an opportunity. A team that is this bad, even if you have a ton of salary cap room, which the Rockets have, again, up to $60 million is currently constructed. You could theoretically even, again, as I mentioned a few moments ago, increase that to 75 million or so if you wanted to offload Kevin Porter Jr., which I think you could as still a very talented 22-year-old on what will basically be an expiring deal. Even with that room, we've seen time and time again in the NBA, the true difference makers, which James Harden, even at 33 years old, he still is arguably top 10. I would say definitely top 15 in terms of his current impact. They get where they want to go. Many times they don't even make it to free agency. They'll force a trade if they're not happy where they currently are. I think one reason why Harden's has not attempted to do that, of course, is that, well, he knows his free agency coincides with when the team he's reportedly most interested in, the Rockets, has all this cap room, so he doesn't have to. And of course, the Sixers, after investing so much into Harden a year ago, are not going to preemptively cut him from the roster. No, they're going to try and make the most of this, and it makes sense to. There's no super team in the NBA this year. It's not implausible that the Sixers could legitimately make a championship run. I hope they don't, because I don't think that serves the Rockets' interests, but we'll see. There's reason why the Sixers wouldn't preemptively move in that direction. But to get back to the larger point, this does not come along for a team like the Rockets that, while a good destination, Houston is not the Los Angeles Lakers. It's not the Miami Heat. It's probably a top 10 market. It's not top 3, top 5. Free agents are not banging on the door to come here to that extent. And if you don't get a James Harden level player, I don't think people realize just how far this current group has to go. Even if you upgrade the coaching staff, which is no given. I mean, I think they will, but in terms of the next coach being the guy, you got to get that hire right. And then there's just so many things to improve. We talked about the shooting. You referenced Şengün's effort, his defense. Stephen Silas has called that out this week and brought that into the spotlight again. There's just so many things. And then they are going to get another high lottery pick. We hope it's Wemby, but whoever it is, it's going to be another 19, 20-year-old kid. There's so far to go. And if you don't get James Harden, again, the types of difference makers at his level, they're not going to be who you're signing with that $60 million or whatever it is in salary cap room. No, you're going to be signing accomplished role players, which, while fine, I don't think this team is add a couple of role players to what you currently have and all of a sudden it's going to start clicking. No, it's going to be a long, long slog. It's very rare to go from where a team like the Rockets currently is to immediately back to relevancy, which is what adding someone like James Harden, assuming health, would do. Paolo, I think you actually hit the nail on the head in one of our early Harden pods around Christmas when this stuff really started leaking in terms of the realistic possibility of Harden coming back. You pointed out that a lot of the people that were sort of reluctant to it tended to be ones that weren't invested on an every game level. That amongst the true diehards, there was more support for the idea. And I've noticed that trend too. And I think there's a reason for that. If you watch this team on anything close to an every game level, you know how bad this currently is and how far they have to go and how alarming it is in terms of, isn't just them being young. There's so many systemic issues. There's so many concerns. A lot of our pods are positive, but keep in mind the reason that we tend to be positive about the rebuild is because this offseason gives them so many chances, be it free agency, coaching, the draft, to change where they are now. It's that they have an opportunity to really change the complexion of where they currently are. It's not to say that where they currently are is okay, because it's not. It's really, really bad. And I think some of the people that don't watch every game, it's easier to think, oh, they're just young, they'll improve, and they're just sort of checked out, and they'll come back in a couple of years when the games are more relevant. And again, I'm not trying to call them bad fans. I completely understand that when a team is this bad, if you've got other priorities, be it other teams, other entertainment options, your family, you just don't want to invest in a team this bad, consuming 2.5 hours, 3 nights a week. I get it. It's fine. I'm not judging you as a bad fan. There are other priorities. However, I will say that if that's you, you may not fully appreciate just how far this team has to go. And James Harden, a player of that stature, I think top 10 Raptor, which is 538's metric, I believe has him like sixth or seventh in the NBA this season. Worst case, top 15 in impact, even though he's 33 years old. Players like that do not join a team like the Rockets that's at the bottom of the league. I mean, we all thought it was pretty crazy in 2018 when LeBron went to the Lakers. A, that was the Lakers, not Houston. And B, those Lakers, while not a playoff team, were considerably better than where the Rockets are now. Yeah,
And
James
you
Harden
knew
is not
you knew they
LeBron.
had the assets for the start. Like that was going to happen eventually.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, Harden or in that case, LeBron had options the same way that Harden does now. So LeBron had to actually choose the Lakers, which he did. And it ended up within 2 years bringing them a title. Of course, when LeBron got there, that basically put the wheels in motion for AD. They had the assets, as you said. In Houston, it's not even to that extent. Now, I'm not saying that Harden is to LeBron, but I'm just saying it is very rare for a team at this stage of its rebuild to get that type of jolt. And there are so many benefits. A lot of people just get bogged down in, well, it's not going to bring them a championship next season or in whatever's left of Harden's prime in all likelihood. So why do it? And again, there's just so many benefits. Again, Tyrese Maxey has clearly had his development boosted by playing alongside James Harden. He makes life so much easier for those young guys. He gets them better shots. He leads the entire NBA in assists. Also, just playing relevant basketball is so useful for development. These guys right now, part of the bad habits come from the fact that you can tell they know these games don't mean anything. It's here we go again. There's basically no culture. There's nothing to keep them engaged on a game in, game out basis, a reason for them to consistently care. So if it's another night where they're not clicking, I mean, sure, if they have a few shots go in, you can see the intensity pick up and they're sort of thinking, hey, this might be a night that we have a chance, or, at least we can have some fun and boost our personal numbers, as opposed to, the Memphis game. You can get a pretty clear picture as soon as the Grizzlies hit them with that run out of the halftime break. It was basically, here we go again. It's done. And again, I don't judge the players too harshly for that. Again, this is a situation devoid of veterans. There's nothing proven in regards to the coaching staff, basketball ops. All of this is new. To go from that to James Harden, I just think that a lot of the people that still aren't on board. I guess, there are some valid, if you want to get into stuff about his age and the latter years of the contract, I guess you can make some arguments on that. But I think the majority of people against it are just not thinking it all the way through or not appreciating just how rare the opportunity is. So to circle back to Idamar's original tweet, which I think is spot on, for a team this bad to all of a sudden have an opportunity of that magnitude to immediately, the second he walks through the door, the second he steps on that court, to have a jolt of that significance. Again, this is way better than draft pick. Sure, you can have, even Wemby is not going to improve your team that much day one in all likelihood. There's a serious development curve. For James Harden, what he currently is, to walk into this team and the jolt that it gives you, that does not happen for teams where the Rockets are. And I think the struggles right now should make you look at the Harden possibility as, just thank your lucky stars. It's something that you should be really, really thankful for, in my opinion, that, Houston and the fan base and the city clearly made a connection with him over his 8+ years with the franchise. And it's giving the Rockets an opportunity that would otherwise not be there. And in my opinion, nothing close would even be there.
Yeah, and I think to pick up on Itamar's tweet, why would he do this? And I think that's a really important point. And sometimes the best way to make an argument is to take all of the counter arguments and address them all. And it's kind of what I want to do to some extent here. Itamar brings up, why would you want to do this? And I think that's a really good question. It's really valid, but we've reached a point where the smoke is just too much, and we've heard of it for so long that there's definitely something there. And what that tells me is he's not coming here for the basketball. He's not coming here for basketball reasons. He says he wants comfort, and I think when he says comfort, a lot of people think, oh, he wants his own team again. He doesn't want to be second fiddle to Embiid. I think, well, this is a little bit of speculation, but I think when James Harden got hurt, his inability to just beat guys with his, athleticism and with his burst. Harden was never an elite tier athlete. He was a good athlete, but not something outrageous like Ja Morant. Harden beat people by slim margins, and he saw those margins shrink, and that's how he changed his game. He had always been a willing passer, but he has changed his game in the way that he focuses a lot on that passing now. It is not a coincidence that he's down to 3.4 turnovers per game for the season, something that hadn't been that low since what I'm having in front of me since his first year in Houston. I don't think that's a coincidence. Yeah. He has refined this play. So just to say, I don't think he's coming here to be the guy. I mean, he'll be the guy, but to be James Harden dropping 30 points again, I don't think that's what he wants. There's the famous clip of him and Steph Curry, and he mentions, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the guy that has to do everything. And he has reiterated that when he was with the Nets, saying, oh, it feels good to have other guys who can pick up the slack and stuff like that. It's not a coincidence that he changed his play style immediately after leaving Houston when he was playing with other stars. And I don't think he wants to go back to... I don't think it's that kind of comfort he's going after. I think what he's after is just his personal comfort, his outside of the court comfort. I think he knows in Houston he's the guy, and he knows everyone, and he knows everything. And he, just life outside of basketball, love it or hate it, strip clubs or no strip clubs, that's important for players. And I think that's what Harden's missing, that he hasn't had ever since he left. And that's why... Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to interject, it's not our place to judge. I feel like everybody since LeBron in 2010 and KD in 2016 has had their minds warped to where they just can't comprehend anything other than maximizing title odds. There's more to being happy. And I mentioned it in my pod with Jackson earlier in the week, but Damian Lillard being celebrated on this week, ironically scoring 71 against the Rockets for staying in Portland and that being his franchise, for better or for worse, maybe that stirs something in James. I do think that, as Damian himself pointed out, using Russ as a counterexample, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. There's so much more to happiness, which ultimately is the point of this for all of us, quite frankly, than a lot of people consider. Again, just because LeBron and KD did it one way, that doesn't mean that everybody else is going to do the same thing. And by the way, just a couple of quick points to what you were saying about the evolution of Harden's game. There's a great article in the Ringer yesterday about James being, who was it? Ali Khan Bijani, Rockets Insider, tweeted it out, and it was about Harden's physical game, how it's changed. And Pena points out that basically Harden is averaging only 13.3 drives per game, his lowest number since 2014. His blow-by rate has been cut in half from about 40% in 2019 to below 20% this year, and yet he's still this good. And then in the article from Kelly and Sam, they actually draw the comparison to Chris Paul with the Phoenix Suns. And of course, Chris in more of a facilitating role. Well, he's always been that, but even more so in Phoenix. And of course, he's taken guys like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton to the next level since he joined the Suns in late 2020, and they got a lot better a lot sooner than anyone really expected. And to me, this actually leaves me more encouraged for Harden in his 30s. The fact that he's doing it with a different formula. If he was doing it with something close to the same formula and this year's success, which is him sort of bouncing back and his hamstring isn't bothering him anymore, then okay, I'd be a little bit wary that if as he gets to 34, 35, 36, then he might fall off. But the fact that he's doing it with an entirely different physical formula actually gives me some optimism that this could be sustainable into his mid to late 30s, that basically he's finding Harden 2.0, Harden 3.0, whatever you want to call it, that it's not who he was a few years ago in Houston, and that's okay. Just like Chris Paul, he's finding a different version that fits who he is now physically, and I think it's one that should be able to age well over the next few years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He's not getting to the rim now. He's doing a lot of, you remember the floater that he developed for the pick and roll game for the lob threat with Capella, the disguised floater that looks like a lob but is actually a floater. That's basically what he does. Instead of getting to the rim, he mastered that floater and he'll stop short of the rim and just float it over you. That shot doesn't age. You're not blowing by people. You can get that shot in the pick and roll without getting by your man or with your man like while being guarded to the side, which is what usually happens. So I don't have many concerns with him physically. But to conclude my earlier point, I think what that tells me, the fact that he wants comfort, I think it's very telling that ever since he left, even for Brooklyn, he was in Brooklyn, I don't know if it actually counts as New York. I'm not from the USA, but it's really close to New York. It does. Okay. He was literally in New York, and at every chance he got, he would come back to Houston. You know, these guys, these star players they go to LA, they go to Miami, they go to New York. You know, they go to these big cities in their off time. James Harden in his off time is coming back to Houston. We are his LA. We are his New York.
And that's rare.
If you make this exact same argument to any other player, to Kawhi Leonard, for example, if you weren't in LA and you wanted to come back, nobody would bat an eye because they'd say, oh, the guy wants to go back to LA, wants to go back to the big market. Houston is LA for James Harden. This is where he wants to be, and that's how it is credible. And to me, that addresses one of the counter arguments that I was citing before, which is I don't think James Harden wants to come here to be on the court ball dominant. And he'll be ball dominant, but not be the same overbearing type of ball dominant that he was before. More of a playmaking style as he ages. His game is, interestingly enough, developed into exactly what you want in a guy to guide young players. So I actually don't think that that's a concern. I don't think that he's coming here for the basketball side, just because it doesn't make sense. If a lot of people bring up, oh, if James Harden's coming, they're going to go trade the young players for a star, and we're going to build this contender around James Harden. No, I don't think that's the point at all. If James Harden wanted that, he would stay in Philly. There is no way that the Rockets not to have the assets, but there's no way the Rockets will be trading for a player that's better than Joel Embiid. He's not going to get a better co-star here. So if you wanted a good co-star, he would just stay in Philly. If you wanted, to go win a title, the Rockets are not going to get a better team than Philly. They're not going to get PJ Tucker. They're not going to get Tyrese Maxey. They're not going to get Anthony Melton. They're not going to get all of Tobias Harris. They're not going to get a team not even near the same level what the Sixers have. So if he's coming back, I do believe that some moves will be made to make the team playable and to make the team competent, because he's not coming here to miss the playoffs. But I do think it won't be to the extent that a lot of people are saying. I think I could see a trade for a lot of people talk about Mikal Bridges because he's the youngest, or not one of the youngest wings on the Nets. I do think that they could make a move for a Mikal Bridges type. I do think they could plug in a 3-and-D wing, a guy that's been there, done that, been in the playoffs. depending on who you draft, there might be a 3 wing, there might be a center, there might be whatever it is. It might even be a power forward, depending on how Jabari Smith keeps developing. But truth is, if you look at it, if you take a step back, that's going to happen anyway. It's not James Harden coming here that's going to force win now moves. The Rockets are at the point in their rebuild where you have too many individual different young players that you're not going to be able to play. You're going to try and win. So you're going to need to convert those and package them either for an upgrade that's still young or for some guys that are a little bit older, but that will provide a better supporting cast for the stars or the centerpieces or the cornerstone of your team right now. Which brings me to, and I have a lot of points that I could list, but I'll transition this to, if James Harden does come in, I think it sparks up a really good debate that's been going on Rocket Twitter for a little bit. It's not just Şengün specific, but I will say, if Harden comes in, there's going to be 8-9 man rotation at best. The Rockets have what? And let's count here. Jalen Green's going to be here. James Harden has mentioned that Jalen Green is one of the guys he's excited to play with. So Jalen Green is going to be here. I think Jabari Smith is going to be here. I think the number, whatever pick we get in this draft, I don't know. Wishfully, the number one pick is going to be here. Yeah, wishfully Wemby. Harden's going to be here. This is 4 guys already. Add on to that, Tyrese, who I think is not going to move. That's 5 guys. And you still have Şengün, 6. You've got, and let's call it, you bring in a couple of vets, so free agents, the other trades.
Yep, because you're still going to have more money.
Yeah, that's already 8 guys. You have one more spot, and we have not talked about Jae'Sean Tate, Josh Christopher, Ty Washington, KJ Martin himself. We have not talked about him. Usman Garuba. This is now 5 guys with trade value that are not going to get a spot to play on this team next year, assuming that, I think bringing in 2 vets is fairly conservative prediction, which means these these end of the bench guys, if you don't trade them, they're going to decrease in value because they're not going to play. And which begs the question, you're going to need to convert some of this talent into vets. And if you can package some of them to get a better vet, that's ideal. I'm at a point where, and this is something that bothers a lot of people, I'm at a point where I would rather give up players. As much as I love them, I would rather give up players than give up picks right now. I think it's more important to move. I would, and this is even more of a hot take, I would rather give up, I'll rather give up Şengün or Jalen or not Jalen probably, because I think
Jalen's a little aggressive.
Yeah, Jalen's a little aggressive, but Şengün or KPJ or perhaps even Jabari Smith, then I would, assuming they have equivalent value, then I would giving up all the Nets picks. Why? Because the Nets picks are a very fluid asset.
Yeah, it's a more liquid asset.
Yeah, that's not going to need playing time to stay afloat, as opposed to a guy like Şengün or Jabari or all of the 5 guys that are later first round picks that I listed. Those guys, if they don't get playing time, they'll be basically worthless. And not Şengün. Şengün, if he doesn't get as much usage, he'll just decrease in value. He'll be a year older. You'll be basically stagnant, most likely. So we have reached the point where we are going to need to give up some of our favorite young players for not win now pieces, hopefully win now and win later pieces, guys that are 25, 26, 27, that still have a full 4-year contract ahead of them, not currently on a 4-year contract, but you know what I mean. They could be re-signed, imagine, for 4 years and still be productive, because role players are productive I think until they're older. So we're reaching a point where, James Harden or not, these moves are going to start to happen because there's not enough ball for all of these players. There's not enough playing time for all of these players. So this is not a James Harden problem, and I don't think it goes as far as he's going to demand us trading for a star. I'll put my not my money where my mouth is. I'm not gonna do a wager, but I would be extremely surprised if the Rockets, if they did trade for a star, if that star were 26 or older, for example. I don't completely take it out of the possibility that they may trade for a star. I just don't think they're going after a Jimmy Butler type to try and win with Harden over the next few years. That's not the goal.
I agree.
The goal,
or Damian Lillard. Yeah.
The goal is to have James Harden come in, and you get to have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that James Harden comes in, you do bring in a couple of vets with him, perhaps consolidation trade, because your rotation is going to condense as well. So you bring in James Harden for the now, so you can be in the playoffs, so you can give that experience to your young players. At the same time, you retain a very high level of upside while you're doing it, because you still have Jalen Green, you still have whatever pick we get in the draft, or Şengün, or Jabari Smith. You're still going to have likely 3 out of those 4, and so you're still going to have a lot of upside. This is not, and I had someone say this to me. This is not committing to myth. This is not, committing to mediocrity. This is getting to mediocrity with a lot of upside to go past it. And I think that's a really important point that a lot of people miss.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people miss the forest for the trees because they want the path back to contention to come all in one fell swoop. And that's just not how it was ever going to work, especially once it became obvious that this team and the current young guys are as far away as they currently are. The reality is that in terms of actually getting by the mid to late 2020s to where you want to go with a legit, consistent playoff team, perennial contender, there's multiple ways you can get there. I guess first off, the dream scenario is that 1 or 2 of the current guys, Jalen, the high pick you get this year, we hope it's Wemby, maybe Jabari or Şengün, 1 or more of those guys eventually turns into a legit superstar, and that's going to take time. That's probably going to take until their 5th or 6th years in the league. But you can hope. That's one route. The other possibility was always going to be not this offseason, but years from now, making most likely an impact trade to get that guy. The analogy to go way back in Rockets history that I would give was actually the late 1990s and early 2000s when they went into the rebuild when Hakeem was on his way out, drafted Steve Francis, got some other nice young players around them like Coutinho Mobley, drafted Yao Ming, and then they packaged some of the non-Yao young players, I got ahead of myself, Steve Francis and Coutinho Mobley, to get Tracy McGrady. And that was the foundation for the next legitimate Rockets contender. And those young guys, Steve Francis, Coutinho Mobley, who were solid players, but clearly not to the level of McGrady, they were useful trade capital. And the Rockets, by virtue of having Yao, had improved themselves to a level quality enough that a guy like McGrady, who had options, was okay with coming to Houston. And that's how, even more so in the 2020s, that stars move. So either you're going to develop those types of players internally, or if you don't, it's going to be years from now, and you're hopefully going to be a desirable enough destination between being in a better place basketball wise than you are now and having a lot of young pieces. At least some of them would remain in place after this hypothetical trade that you could get, let's say, whatever a mid 2020s version of Tracy McGrady in 2004 is, to use that analogy. That is what's ultimately going to take you to the next level. So what you need out of this summer, be it James Harden or anything else you could do in free agency, is to sign guys that can improve the assets of your current rebuild. Make guys like Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason, whoever you draft this summer, make them play better in the years ahead to where your basketball team is better. They're more desirable. Also, by doing so, you make your team, again, more desirable, and you give them more trade assets because those young players are developing the types of winning habits and developing in the right way because they're playing meaningful basketball games to where they could conceivably be the Steve Francis and Coutinho Mobley of this Tracy McGrady analogy. A lot of people, I think, just have this idea that whoever they sign this summer, there's going to be the perfectly aged role players. They're just going to grow with the current group and eventually turn into the next contender. In all reality, that's probably not how it was ever going to work. This summer was always about helping you get out of the basement where you are now and take the next step as you climb. And the way I look at it is there's a huge mountain from where they are now. James Harden, compared to, using that $60 million in cap space on a couple of, decent role players, but obviously no one near Harden's caliber, it's like an elevator that takes you a third of the way up that mountain. And it allows you to save your energy, to save your capital for all these other challenges that are still going to be there in the years ahead. That, to me, is why this is so smart. And I've seen some argue, you can tie this in with the salary as well, because I think it's probably going to take a 4-year maximum contract to get James Harden to Houston. And good news, by the way, there's an analysis that Liberty Ballers put out today that actually there was a thought that Philadelphia could offer him a 5th year that Houston couldn't. That's not exactly true, because Harden thankfully has an August birthday and not an October birthday. Because he had an August birthday, he would actually turn 38 before the season starts in the 5th year, which basically is complicated, but it essentially means that they can't offer him a 5th guaranteed year. It would have to be given as deferred compensation over the first 4 years.
Yeah, but basically, it's supposed to be that way. So the rule basically exists. So
the over 38 rule.
Yeah, the over 38 rule basically exists. So teams can't handicap their faraway future for the now by paying players that are, at the end of they are good right now but could fall off at any given point. And usually
the same principle as the Stepien rule.
Yeah, and so basically the way it works is if it's not a max player, the years that are past 38 are actually paid before the player turns 38, and so the team doesn't have a cap hit then that would hamstring them. The problem is that the NBA also has a rule that you can't make more than the max salary no matter what. This happens with, for example, the trade bonuses. The trade bonus is only paid if the player is not right up against his max salary, and the only portion that will be paid is the portion that brings the player up to the maximum salary that the league allows. The problem with Harden is you're signing a new contract, and it is going to be a max, so you can't distribute the last year across the first 4 because he's already making the max, right? So because of that, they can't just offer it at all. I think they can only offer it if it's non-guaranteed, which for Harden is no good at all, because if it's not guaranteed, you might as well not sign it. And if you're still good by then, they'll just sign a new contract, a new long-term contract with another team. I did want to bring to mention about that in specific. Frank from the Chop brought up that there are some loopholes, and that Daryl Morey would find a way to make it work, kind of just blindly trusting Morey, because we know how he was when he was in Houston. He gave that vibe a little bit. It has been since clarified on Twitter by one of the Sixers reporters that sourced within the Sixers front office and other cap gurus out there, that they actually, and because there is an exception to the rule if the player is under 35 when he signs the contract, but that exception doesn't apply to Harden. So they can't give him that contract anyways. They can't give him the 50 year anyways. It's already been confirmed. And I just wanted to push back a little bit on this perception that Daryl Morey was just going to make whatever work. You'll find a loophole. This is not, the same league it was when Daryl Morey was doing that. The league already sent, and Rockets fans might remember, the ones that keep up closely anyways. The league has already pushed back on this notion that Daryl Morey can just do whatever he wants, and they have shown willingness to just cut his wheels off, even when he does find a loophole. Back then, I don't know if y'all remember the Nene contract that had a lot of unlikely incentives that still counted as likely incentives for a trade, but didn't count as likely incentives for tax purposes. It was basically incredibly bloated deal. It was a minimum deal. It counted as a minimum deal for tax purposes, but if they needed to make a trade, it could be bloated from the 2.6 million it was back then all the way up to 10. And the league basically said, screw you. What we're going to do is he gets the 2 million a year or a little bit over 2 million a year, and you don't get all of these nonsense guarantees. And there was no, the CBA, I'm pretty sure, has one of those clauses that's basically a cover my ass clause for the NBA, which is if an attempt is made to circumvent this, the league reserves the right to decide or to void any contract or something like that. And so basically the league has already made it very clear that there's no loophole exploiting that will be going on by Daryl Morey, because they've already done this before. This is not, and it's pretty telling that it hasn't happened in the last 4 or 5 years at the very least.
Yeah.
So when he tried, it was denied. So I just wanted to push back on the perception that because it's Daryl Morey, he's going to find a way. I mean, there are rules.
They made it clear that if they think that something is being violated, a loophole in this case, that basically goes against the spirit of the CBA, that they will step in and that they have the power to do that. And of course, some people don't agree with that, but the reality is, you're right. They have shown that as a precedent. So yeah, I would not hang my hat on finding some loophole, especially with a player the scale of James Harden, because someone that significant to the league, that sets a huge template for the future. The league is going to think long and hard about anything that would go against the spirit of the agreement they have in place. And again, the over 38 rule was put into place after careful negotiating between the league and the players union. And so, yeah, I would not expect Adam Silver to sort of just turn his head and say, well, you found a loophole, I'm good with it. No, they've shown a willingness to step in. The Nene contract's a perfect example. Even something that small, when they thought it violated the spirit of the CBA, they stepped in. They would certainly do the same for a player as significant as Harden, because that would have much more implications, I think, really for years to come, because lots of superstars are going to hit the market at that age. Those are some of the only guys that actually hit the market. Free agency, that is, because younger guys tend not to make it for a number of reasons. It's easier to extend them. So yeah, I would expect the NBA to be very, very involved if anything like that were to be tried. So the bottom line is, yeah, the Rockets could absolutely match the Sixers financially. That's a huge perk that before today I was not fully aware of. Now the Sixers could still give them slightly, Harden that is, higher annual raises, but that would be offset by the fact that Pennsylvania has a state income tax and Texas does not. So it comes across very, very similarly. So the Rockets are at financial parity, assuming they offer the max for James Harden with the Sixers. So again, it would not be a financial decision. And if it's based on other reasons, then I think it's pretty clear, unless you think that Adrian Wojnarowski, Tim McMahon, Sam Amick, not just Houston reporters, really credible national names, unless you think they're all out to lunch and getting basically the wool pulled over their eyes, I think there's pretty clear evidence that there's a lot of very real pull to Houston on a number of fronts. And just to close the loop on the argument I was making with the salary math, I see some people that, they just get a little bit squeamish over a 4-year max to a 34-year-old James Harden and say, well, how's that going to age when he's 36, 37 years old? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think his game itself is actually going to age pretty gracefully, similarly to Chris Paul. That's an analogy that Kelly and Sam made, and I agree with that. As far as the contract, again, there's two routes to contention, in my opinion. It's either internal development with some combination of Jalen, your 2023 pick, and maybe if you get really lucky, Jabari or Şengün developing into, one or more of those guys into top tier difference makers, legit top 10 players. Or if they're not quite there, they at least become pretty good and you trade for a guy of that stature in 2 or 3 years from now. It was never going to be keep your books open. I've seen some people point out that, well, in the mid to late 2020s, you're going to have to start giving extensions and bigger dollars to Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Şengün, and what happens to, your finances, because you clearly can't have cap room at that point. Again, if it didn't work out in terms of these prospects internally developing into guys that can be, the best player on a championship team, that was always going to have to be by trade, to use the Tracy McGrady parallel. It was never realistic to think that in 2025, even if you could, with just Jalen getting an extension and maybe not, Jabari or 2023 pick yet, again, it was just never realistic to expect a star in appropriate age alignment to be had via free agency. It was always,
it's not even a problem, though.
Is. Yeah, well, I agree. That's what I'm getting at. And then to close the other loop, as far as Daryl that you brought up, I think one thing that's giving me a little bit of pause as far as this whole leak fest since Christmas. Daryl has seemed oddly confident. There's a quote in the Sam Amick story about people in the Sixers are unconcerned. I think that was pretty clearly from Daryl. I know that Daryl and Sam, I know from watching Daryl over his many years in Houston. Sam Amick was one of his go-to guys. So I would bet a lot of money that was the source there, that the Sixers felt that both financially and certainly from a basketball perspective, they could offer more. And Gerald insisted that he knows it's all about basketball for James. And then there was another interview, which I aggregated for Rockets Wire from Justin Grazzo, a Philadelphia-based reporter, asked about the Harden to Rockets rumors. Morey says, that one makes no sense. That seems to be invented by someone. Look, I have to be honest, I don't understand it at all. And there's part of me that says, am I missing something? Because Morey is around James Harden every single day. But ultimately, the more I think about it, I'm actually not that surprised or deterred by those quotes. There's a few reasons. First off, the Sixers can win a title this year. It's realistic. There's no super teams out there. So it behooves Daryl Morey to put forth a confident face, because if he, as the president of basketball operations, is indicating that he's worried or in doubt, then think about how that's going to be perceived in the locker room. According to the Kelly and Sam article, there's already key Sixers players, they say, who think that Harden may be headed to Houston. If Gerald Morey gives off the impression that he's not confident, it's going to become even more of an issue for a team that legitimately has a chance. Say what you will, but they are very talented, and there's no super team this year. They could make a run. And so to maximize their chances, then yeah, you want to minimize anything that could be a distraction, which this could be. The other thing is that we have precedent. I love Daryl, but look at the summer of 2019, his last full offseason in Houston. There were so many leaks about how confident the Rockets were in Jimmy Butler, while everything nationally said that Jimmy Butler was going to the Miami Heat. We all wanted to believe. Now, Gerald didn't say this on the record. It was all leaked, but take a wild guess who's talking to reporters off the record about Houston's free agency plans. What ended up happening? Within 2 hours of free agency opening, Jimmy Butler went to Miami, just like all the national guys said, and all the alleged confidence from the Houston side, there was nothing to it. The same thing that happened around that same couple of week period, he was saying Chris Paul would not be traded. That was in the aftermath of the Vince Goodwill article, all the alleged tension between Harden and Chris Paul. Chris Paul would not be traded until 2 weeks later he was, for Russell Westbrook, which, say what you will about that trade, but the bottom line is Daryl said something that absolutely was not true. He said it just because it was politically convenient, the easy thing for him to say at that time. So these quotes from Daryl, there's part of me that's like, he's seeming awful confident, but then the more I think about it, number one, he has reason to maximize his odds with this particular team. And two, we've seen him do this before, when in reality, that was not what was going on behind the scenes. It was just something that he was saying out front. And at this point, again, the more you think about it, there's been so many reports to act like that people like Woj and Sam Amick are having the wool pulled over their eyes. That's just silly. I mean, they're clearly talking to people who know the dynamics. And while I don't think Harden to Houston is inevitable, this idea that it's just fake news and people are just inventing this storyline. No, this is not just one or two wishful thinking people in Houston. This is legitimate. So that's the other thing on Daryl. I don't mean that as a shot at him, because again, I do think he's sort of operating in his own self-interest. I just think it's important to note, because with these stories coming out, with Daryl sort of pushing back and acting like nothing to see here, we're not worried. He's done this before, and then it's turned out the complete opposite of what he said. So I wouldn't be worried by that. And the bottom line, again, to sort of sum up my argument, because I know we're at an hour now and we need to start winding down, I just don't see a lot of downside. As I was saying earlier, the third and fourth years, again, I just don't really see that as all that inhibitive, because I don't expect the Rockets, if they don't develop internally into a contender a few years from now, then I think you're going to be having to look to the trade market anyway. I just don't see that much downside to this move. I see a ton of upside in that it just clears so many steps. It's not that, it's not that the rebuild is hopeless without Harden. Again, I think changing out the coaching staff could do a lot, add in some veterans, maybe add in some shooting, although a shooting coach, as you mentioned earlier, is probably the more wise investment there, given the way the last couple of years have gone. But it's just Harden gives you so much of a higher floor, and I really just don't see much downside, assuming health.
Yeah, speaking of downside, I'm going to use another one of the arguments that people have used against me. One of them is, and this is actually curiously enough, from a fan that's not a Rockets fan. He was saying that Houston should just stay the course, that they should bank on their young players panning out. They should bank on, surprisingly enough, it's a Thunder fan, so he has a little bit of stake in the game. But he thought that we should take it slow. I don't think signing Harden is a shortcut. First of all, because you're not spending assets to do so. And I think that's a big part of it. If you told me, would you trade Şengün and 3 picks for James Harden? Hell no. If you for James Harden or Jimmy Butler or KD or whoever it is, I would not spend a star level amount of assets to trade for a star that is as old as James is. But that's not what's happening here. The Rockets are signing James Harden in free agency. James Harden is probably the biggest name to move if he did move in free agency. He's probably the biggest name to move in free agency from some guys have hit free agency. AD hit free agency, but everybody he was re-signing with the Lakers. James Harden is probably the biggest free agent to move if he does move since Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant to Brooklyn. 4 years ago? That's how long it's been since the star has moved through free agency. That goes to tell you what the actual value of cap space is nowadays. The fact that James Harden is an excellent use of your cap space. You're not going to get better value because James Harden is worth more than a max contract right now. His production on the court, let's not forget, James Harden is averaging 22 and 11, 11 being assists with 6 rebounds and only 3.4 turnovers a game. He's still getting over steal a game somehow. He gambles a little bit, but he's also shooting a career high from 39.4%. He's having, I think, if you exclude these years in OKC where he was more of a role player, he's having the second most efficient season of his career. This is a really good player. This guy's was usually max contract guys are worth more than what the max can pay them. That's the point of the max. They're basically all of the stars are underpaid compared to their impact. James Harden is very much that as well. Not only is he worth more than what the Rockets are going to pay him, if the Rockets pay anybody else that's not a max guy, they're going to have to overpay them to convince them to come to Houston, considering the situation that they're in right now. The fact that James Harden wants to come here is such an outlier that I think a lot of people forget about that. And then the math going forward, right? There's an opportunity while you're not giving up assets, there's an opportunity cost to spending that cap space. But as I said, you're going to overpay for nearly every free agent you have or you're going after. Guys just don't hit free agency anymore, especially stars.
Yep.
The cap space is still useful if you want to trade for a guy into cap space. Yes, that is valid. I would say that unless James Harden declines very heavily, very fast, giving a team back James Harden and assuming it's not going to fall apart year 1 or year 2. I think the concern is after the first couple of years. Right. I think most teams trading a star would rather get James Harden back on a 2-year deal than they would just outright cap space or a traded player exception. That would be massive from taking cap space, and that cap space not even likely going to be there because you're going to fill it with something. You're going to have something there. You're not even going to be able to give a trade exception, which is the most versatile salary mechanic that there is. And the other thing that people bring up is rookie extension, which you touched on. James Harden is going to be making 35% of the cap right now. By the time, and important to realize, the first 2 years of his contract, nobody needs an extension. The first draft class that we have is Jalen Green. His extension would only kick in 2 years. The first year, nothing. The second year, nothing. The third year, that's when Jalen Green's extension kicks in. So when James Harden has 2 years left on this deal. Jabari Smith's extension, if you were to get one, would only kick in while Harden is an expiring contract. If Rockets get Wemby or Scoot or whoever it is, their extensions would only kick in after James Harden's contract is already gone. And then it's also important to realize a rookie extension right now, this may change because new CBA and everything. Right now, it's 25% of the cap unless a guy makes an All-NBA team. 25% of the cap when it is signed, it doesn't adapt 25% of the cap if the league has an outlier growth year. So that's 25% of the cap. Call it Jalen Green, Jabari Smith. Awesome problem to have. They're really good. They're both max players, which I really doubt. Yeah. You're spending,
Same.
By the time those extensions, the extensions kick in, let's say you're spending half of your cap space on Jalen Green in Jabari Smith. James Harden's contract by then won't be 35% anymore. It will be something close to 28% or something like that, because the gap just grows. It's always exceeding. Besides the COVID years, it's always been exceeding the growth projections that the NBA has had. And that's just going to keep happening. A new TV deal is coming, even with cap smoothing. That means that the curve will be less steep, but it will accelerate, likely after those extensions kick in. And so it just sounds to me like a good problem to have. If you have James Harden and your rookies are looking like max guys, yes, please. You should go get rid of James Harden. Well, please give me that problem compared to what we have now.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you should just be thankful. I mean, compare it to where we are now. Again, that's why I'm going back to your theory over and over again. I think the people that are sort of poo-pooing this idea, either they're being overly emotional or a combination of that, and they're just not invested on this team to the point where they fully appreciate the depths of where we currently are. Because holy hell, that sounds like an amazing problem to have relative to what we're going to watch this weekend.
Yeah, and one last thing, just so to push back a little bit on we've been a lot of positivity about the James Harden return. The one problem, and the one thing that may make me unhappy with the James Harden return is and I don't think this is going to happen, but the possibility that because James Harden's coming, we do something crazy, like instead of taking Scoot Henderson, we go for I just blanked on the name. Is it Brandon Miller?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
TSA God. Checkpoint guy. TSA checkpoint.
I was about to say, but sorry to bring it back. If you get picked 2 and you pick for fit, the only way signing James Harden can backfire realistically is if you tailor franchise altering decisions, core franchise components. If you tailor those around James Harden, like the number 2 pick would be, because you have the chance of drafting a guy that's generational. As long as you don't do that, James Harden is just coming in as a boost.
Yeah.
He's a power up for this team. He's
a bridge to relevancy. If that is the way that you're looking at him, and I think the evidence, as you laid out earlier, supports that it's what the Rockets are thinking and it's what James is thinking, then yes, James Harden is a way better bridge to relevancy than whatever role players you could conceivably sign with that money otherwise this offseason. Because again, it's an NBA where 4 quarters does not equal $1. James Harden as a bridge to relevancy is the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Assuming that's what it is. Assuming that it's a bridge to relevancy and it's not James Harden being brought in as the superstar of your team, or he's controlling every decision, like, say, drafting Brandon Miller because he's a better fit relative to Scoot Henderson. Assuming that James is basically just like a super version of, the role players that sort of help your current team get up a level or 2, sign me up. There's no downside.
Yeah, and I guess that is one downside, because he is 34 years old. There is the possibility that he just gets a terrible injury again, like year 1 or year 2, and you're stuck with a bad contract. You're stuck with a Porzingis type deal. The likelihood of that happening, while it may be a little bit higher with James Harden, it's just as likely, not just as likely, but it's nearly as it would be nearly as likely for that to happen if you went and you got Fred VanVleet or someone else. All of these players have questions. Any signing that you make is going to have an inherent risk of injury. It is a little bit higher with James, perhaps because of his age and because of how high usage he's been his entire career. But that's a risk you run with anyone. And the upside of James Harden on this team is just crazy. It's not like you're bringing in a guy that's going to play a role that you already. It's so perfect that it's not even like you're bringing in a guy that's going to take usage away from other guys. I mean, he's going to, but you're already talking about bringing in a true point guard this offseason. He even fits the position of need that you have right now. It's not like it's not like you're bringing in a shooting guard that's going to take reps away from Jalen Green, or you're bringing in a power forward, although Jabari is flexible, or a guy that's going to take minutes away from Jabari Smith Jr., or you're bringing in, I don't know, Karl Anthony Towns, and you're going to give up on Sengun as the product of that. It's just.
And by the way, the counter
so
to your
perfect.
point on durability is that Harden has been insanely durable, other than the 1 year, and that's not even like anything catastrophic, just a nagging hamstring that happens to everybody. Other than that, Harden has actually been extraordinarily durable in that way, similar to LeBron for basically his whole career. So, I mean, I would argue that even if he's a little bit older, again, that's sort of offset by the fact that look, he's been very durable, and that risk is there with anybody. So, yeah, that's not really all that concerning to me.
Yep. I think we're nearing a longer podcast. I'll just add a shout out because I think it's due. Ty Washington's been playing great basketball. He is and has
There you
been.
go.
Yeah, and he is and has been a lot of what this team needs in terms of taking care of the ball. His assist to turnover ratio is insane. He is the opposite of a young player in the sense that he has that rare instinct of just not overthinking or not being careless with the ball, which is something that all young guards or most of the young guards have. And I'm not going to turn this into a Stephen Salas rant, but it's mind blowing that on a team that struggles with turnovers as much as the Rockets do, you're still not giving Ty Washington a berm. He has gotten it because of injuries, but just a couple of games ago, they shouldn't have started over him. There's no reason at this point to not just see what you have in Ty Washington, because a lot of people say we need to bring in a vet point guard, if for nothing else for the bench. You might have the exact type of point guard that you want, a guy that's going to take care of the ball and be consistent and be able to play off the ball when one of the cornerstone pieces is on the floor. You might have that already in Ty Washington. And as I said, a lot of these lower end draft picks are not going to get a chance next year when they're trying to be better because of the rotation being shorter. You have, I think it's in the
20 games
teams now.
left.
Is it 20?
20 games left. Yep.
Yeah, you have 20 games left. You need to see what you have in Ty Washington. Which brings me to one last point. Because of that, and because of guys like Josh Christopher, who you need to see, because of guys like Usman Garuba, who you need to see, there is no reason for KPJ to go out there and say, hey, I'm still hurt, but I'm trying to play through it because I want to play basketball. Or there's no reason to go out there and say and see Jalen Green's tweaking his jump shot because he needs something that's going to put less strain on his groin, which is the injury that he was dealing with. Guys, please, I beg, please do not do not risk a long-term injury for meaningless games, especially when there's the incentive to find out what you have in a lot of these players that haven't gotten a chance earlier in the season. I'm going to say it again, there is a very real chance that I would back Ty Washington being the backup point guard next season, even with the James Harden there. So let's find out what we have, because it's really rare to have the talent that Ty Washington has to, play at his own pace and look like a true playmaker on the floor, while combining that with the fact that he has a plus wingspan. He's 6'3", but he does have, I think, 6'9" wingspan. He can shoot. He's willing to shoot, and he has a floater game which is tailor-made for playing off the ball if you need it. He's just in control all the time. That's rare. Please let's tap into that, especially as a young team that sorely needs it.
Yeah. I will just interject by saying I think the Jalen thing was something they were planning anyway. I think that the injury may have added another layer to it, but from what I've heard, that's something that they were sort of looking to do anyway. It's just tough to make form changes on the fly because there's not much practice time, and a lot of time guys are just going to revert back to their old habits during the game because, again, the separation you get during games is so little that it's tough to really think about your mechanics at all times. So it just sort of happened that this 2-week layoff for Jalen gave him the type of extended practice time that you typically don't have during the season that allowed them to do what they were sort of hoping to do anyway. So that's the one thing I would say there. Your point is well taken. I would just say with Jalen and specifically, I think it's something that they were looking at doing anyway. It's just sort of the work to go full circle that, Lucas has tried to do with the form anyway. And then with Kevin Porter Jr., yeah, you're exactly right. They shouldn't push it. And actually, organizationally, maybe they rest him one of these 2 back-to-back games and they have an incentive because if he misses, I believe, 2 more games than his projected cap hit this summer. Al Chilik pointed this out on Twitter because he won't hit because 60 games will no longer be deemed a likely incentive for him. If he's under that number, then his cap hit this summer will be about 16 million rather than 18.3. And that means nothing to KPJ, because the KPJ, in terms of what he actually gets, it's all based on what he plays next year. All that would be changing is to the Rockets, for accounting purposes, what's on their salary books, because if he misses the 60-game mark this season, then that incentive is deemed unlikely. So that's another reason. Besides the fact that, yeah, you don't want to risk any injury offseason, the Rockets also have a reason financially to be conservative with KPJ, and I think they will, to make sure that you shave a couple million and maybe $1.5 million off of his salary cap figure this summer.
Okay, so 60 games is the cutoff. He currently has 41 games played with 20 to go. 60, the number 60 in specific, is enough for the incentive to become likely. So he needs to basically end at 59. I just confirmed it. And one last thing that I would like to say, it's while I just complained that Jalen Green, could possibly be being rushed, I don't think he is, because he doesn't look uncomfortable out there playing. But it's just so nice to have that. James Harden is such a spark playing basketball. It's enjoyable to watch him play. He's exciting, and I've liked what I've seen as far as shot selection since he's come back. He still does take some questionable shots, but I do think he's been efficient. He has been more in control. I think his passing is shining a little bit as well, compared to the way it was before. And I would like to make a position for us to stop dumping the ball to Jalen Green with 3 seconds on the clock, because last game in specific, there were at least 3 instances of this happening. And if they hadn't happened, Jalen would actually have and this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, of course, but he'd have like a great, efficient game. We are fans. We don't get a lot to cheer for as Rockets fans nowadays. It's nice when Jalen ends the game with a since we're not trying to win anyways, with a nice, wholesome, efficient stat line, so we don't have to hear the Chucker doesn't contribute to winning narratives anymore. This, from a fan perspective, this is not actually actual analysis, of course.
All right. Well, we'll end things there because, number one, we've gone on long enough. This might actually be our longest episode. We'll have to see once we get done with editing. If not, it's going to be very close. But yeah, let's end on some positivity because, again, it's tough to find that with the current group. Perhaps they'll even get a win this weekend, back-to-back against the Spurs, although I don't think we want both wins. Let's split. Let's get one win for the Vibes to end the losing streak, but also to make sure that you keep that floor of pick 5, which you do if you're the worst team in the league, as they are right now, rather than risking falling to pick 6 or pick 7 in the first round come June. So yeah, I'll go for 1-1. You do need to win once in a while. You don't want to literally end the season on like a 25, 30 game losing streak. So, get one of these 2 games against the Spurs. Not both of them. Specifically, let's get one with Jalen going for 35, 40 points on strong efficiency so that we can feel good about that. And again, because the Spurs have a 2-game cushion going in, it really wouldn't be that costly in the grand scheme. Actually, it wouldn't be costly at all, because if you go 1-1, well, the game you lose, you're giving it directly to them. So in the grand scheme, as long as you don't go 2-0, then you're not going to be in a good, bad place draft-wise. And in terms of winning, I think, number one, it'd be good for the Vibes. Sometimes these kids do need a win. And then for Jalen in particular, if he can get going coming off the groin injury, that'd be a really good sign if hopefully he can finish the season even a fraction as well as he did a year ago.
Yeah, just a quick update before we sign off. The Clippers pick, track thingy. They are currently pick 18, and the Bucks is currently pick 30. So I think this is the biggest delta we've had so far.
Wow.
The Bucks were better. They've since gotten ahead of the Celtics and the Nuggets. So right now it's a 12 spot jump, which makes the deal look even better. The Eric Gordon deal.
Yep.
And the Clippers seem to be in a slump. Russell, I think they're winless since Westbrook came back. And there's teams creeping up on them. They currently have 33 wins. Dallas has 32. Minnesota has 32. That's 2 teams. Utah and New Orleans both have 31. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have currently 6 teams within 2 games. That would knock them all the way from what they are right now at 18, like all the way to a 12. Imagine that.
Yeah, that would be nuts. All right, well, let's end on that. That's a really positive note to end on. The Rockets can somehow get 2 lottery picks out of this. Granted, there is a top 6 protection, so if they somehow got the top 4, then obviously you'd fall down to the Milwaukee pick at a second. But I think you would gladly take that very slight risk in exchange for the upside, the extremely likely upside of getting a second lottery pick. Yeah, let's end on that, because that's a wonderful scenario to think about this summer. On top of what we spent most of this long episode discussing, the potential of James Harden coming back to Houston. With that, we will finally adjourn. For Paolo, I'm Ben. If you want more content for our next episode, the best way to get it is on Twitter. I'm on there at Ben Dubose. Paolo is on there at Paolo Alves NBA. Also, the show, The Logger Line, brought to you courtesy of Clutch 3 Lager of Karbach Brewing. It has its own Twitter page as well, at The Logger Line. That's where you can find our link tree. And besides finding all of our podcast distributors, Apple, Google, Spotify, you can also find links to our friends, partners, sponsors, Sports Talk 790, Karbach Brewing, Rockets Wire. You can find their information and content through that link tree, which is available at the Logger Line. With those plugs complete, we'll finally break. For Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of the Logger Line.